Y'all, this isn't another chaotic headline you skim and leave behind. This is a public unraveling of a champion's legacy, playing out frame by frame, and everyone caught in it is taking visible hits. What began as quiet murmurs has mutated into screenshots, legal pressure, private messages going public, and alliances shattering on contact. And once the timeline clicks, you can't look away. At the eye of this hurricane stands Claressa Shields, flawless between the ropes, praised as a symbol of control, power, and precision. But beyond the spotlight, her world is allegedly spiraling into a ruthless tug-of-war fueled by pride, fear, and betrayal. And this is where things turn dark. Personal accusations start landing, not petty chatter, but claims sharp enough to end careers and threaten futures. Lines are drawn. Names get exposed. Attorneys step in. Quiet legal notices begin circulating. This isn't drama anymore, it's legal combat. Then comes the shock nobody saw coming. A supposed closest ally doesn't just speak, she blows it up. Stories emerge so severe the internet stalls. Claims involving minors. Pregnancies amid conflict. Terminations. Training under dangerous conditions. Accusations so heavy people don't know whether to rage, grieve, or doubt everything. And just when it feels maxed out, the triangle mutates into a 5-player disaster. A husband. A wife. An alleged secret link. A fiancé. And a carefully built image that can't withstand what's leaking out. Messages flood the feed. And suddenly the story reverses. The invincible champion narrative fractures. Desperate texts come to light. And the crowd turns vicious. Because now it's no longer about who's right. It's about who's faking, who's manipulating, and who's about to watch it all collapse. And when Tasha K steps into the frame, that's when real fear kicks in. Posts get edited. Regrets get posted.
And so here's what I'm going to do in terms of the cease and desist. So my lawyers have been going back and forth with her lawyer. And we've been trying to figure out what was actually said that was defamatory. Now, there was one thing that I did see that was mentioned that could be grounds for any type of lawsuit, but we have since corrected that. And so let me tell you what happened right before we get into the specifics of why we're here. All right, because this is my formal apology to the GOAT, to the greatest to ever do it. Okay, I told you if I get something wrong, we're gonna.
The second lawyers step into a situation, it stops being tea and starts turning into ammunition, because gossip can be brushed off, rumors can be joked away, but documents don't joke. And that's why this feels so chilling. Claressa Shields isn't just trending for drama, she's being pulled into a storyline that's unfolding like a planned implosion. One accusation lands, then another, until you're no longer watching a scandal. You're watching a public identity being taken apart piece by piece. Here's what a lot of people overlook. Claressa didn't step into this mess as some clout-chasing internet personality. She stepped in as a champion. A proven athlete with titles, stats, and a legacy. The kind of resume that's supposed to drown out noise, but the internet doesn't respect resumes when it senses weakness. So the moment Claressa's name became linked to Papoose, a man still legally connected to Remy Ma, things didn't just get complicated. They became volatile. Because this isn't a harmless situation where everyone's unattached and emotions get bruised. This is a setup where every person involved is guarding something valuable. Image, reputation, leverage, control. And once control is on the line, fairness disappears. That's why the low-blow accusations landed so heavy. These weren't playful jabs. These were claims designed to sway public opinion and trigger legal response. The kind of claims that make people whisper, "Careful, she's not going to play online, she'll take this to court." And that reaction says everything. Because when those warnings start circulating again and again, it means the real exchanges already moved off camera. Cease and desist energy doesn't start on timelines. It starts in private chats, forwarded screenshots, late-night calls, and that moment when someone realizes they crossed a line. And this is where it turns darker, because Claressa isn't battling a single opponent. She's dealing with a circle that's caving in. Remy Ma is connected, Papoose is connected, Tasha K is connected, and then, the most dangerous role of all shows up, the best friend. Because strangers can fabricate, enemies can exaggerate, but when someone who claims access to your real life speaks up, that's when the audience stops calling it gossip and starts calling it possible.
A story on her being in Hawaii with Papoose, right? And Papoose's side chick allegedly popped up and said, "I'm in Hawaii, same pretty too." Now, Remy Ma has already spilled the wine on Claressa not being the only one.
And pay attention to how it's presented. Even in that clip, it plays like a domino effect. Hawaii, Papoose, another woman, Remy already speaking out. Not a straightforward romance, but a tangled storyline where Claressa is allegedly not even the sole focus. And that's exactly what makes public opinion so risky. Because the moment the not the only one narrative takes hold, Claressa's role changes instantly. She's no longer framed as the new relationship. She becomes one of many. And that's when humiliation creeps in. Not because she doesn't have the right to choose who she dates, but because the optics paint her as connected to a man who is still legally married, and the internet turns that into a joke. But jokes don't stay jokes for long. They evolve into legal pressure. Because now, media platforms aren't just describing sightings or connections. They're assigning intentions. They're defining positions. They're interpreting power plays.
The video of Claressa's man who's married, because she is technically dating a married man, which is a mistress, which is she's a champion and a side bitch at the same time, no allegedly, okay? He's still married to Remy. And you are very much thirsty, okay? Like I said, this is my formal apology.
Because at this point, it's no longer just chatter. It's a public tag being stamped. Involved with a married man. Still legally tied to Remy. And then the red flag. Official apology. Apologies don't surface when things are harmless. Apologies surface when someone realizes the narrative has entered dangerous territory. And that's exactly where this section is meant to leave the audience, not with answers, but with a question that sounds like a warning. If it's already reached the stage of a formal apology, what do you think happens when the next batch of receipts appears? Because from here, the story doesn't just get uglier. It gets costly. By the time that apology went public, the impact was already locked in. Because apologies don't erase a storyline, they signal that a boundary was crossed. And once that boundary exists, people stop asking what was said. They start asking why it needed to be taken back. This is the moment the narrative tilts from humiliation to legal weight. Up until now, everything could still be dismissed as drama. Messy entanglements, blurred lines, screenshots leaking, public embarrassment. Ugly, yes, but manageable. But the second allegations touched anything that could threaten Claressa's career, her titles, her eligibility, her income. The atmosphere shifted instantly. This stopped being about romance. This became about evidence. And the substance angle is where the situation turns volatile. Because suddenly, the debate isn't about emotions. It's about tests, thresholds, regulations, and penalties. A swab. A sample. One result clearing someone. Another ending everything. And a world-class athlete trapped in the middle of a claim she says is false. That's the moment it stops feeling like disorder and starts feeling like strategy. Because when accusations put championships at risk, laughter disappears. Lawyers get called. Behind closed doors, teams scramble. Captions get scrutinized. Old posts are re-examined. Screenshots are saved. Not for views, for defense. And that's exactly why Tasha K's platform becomes impossible to ignore. Not because she created the controversy, but because her reach magnified it. And amplification comes with accountability. Which is why this interview moment matters so much, because it captures the exact second where commentary slams into consequence.
It was posted alleging that Claressa smoked on our platform, and that is not true. To my knowledge, Claressa hasn't smoked any weed. To my knowledge, Papoose didn't give her any weed. And so that was damaging, right? And so I apologize for that, Claressa, and apologize that came out on my platform. And so we have since changed the caption to something that was directed at what was in the content. And I told my team, don't be adding nothing extra. Don't be adding nothing. I know you're messy. That's why I hired y'all, but don't add nothing extra, because then it costs me extra. And then I got to pay these lawyers, and these lawyers be $600 an hour.
Pay close attention to what's actually happening in that clip. It isn't denial. It's containment. The tone isn't emotional, it's administrative. Captions, posts, financial impact, attorneys, hourly billing. That's not how someone sounds when they're gossiping. That's how someone speaks when they realize the situation has crossed into territory where money, liability, and survival are at stake. And the subtext couldn't be louder. Because when someone says that caused damage, they're not talking about hurt feelings. They're talking about exposure. And when hourly rates enter the conversation, that's anxiety disguised as professionalism. This is also the moment the audience starts clocking something else. The apology doesn't feel heartfelt. It feels calculated. Not, I caused harm. But this could cost me. And once viewers sense that shift, empathy dries up and suspicion fills the gap. Because the next question becomes unavoidable. If this part crossed the line, what else was overstated? But the internet never pauses for nuance. It speeds up. While one side scrambles to revise captions, the other side floods timelines with context. Old screenshots reappear. Clips get replayed frame by frame. Every pause, every phrasing choice, every dodge gets analyzed. And that's where the idea of receipts transforms. Because receipts don't just confirm events. They decide credibility. And here, credibility is currency. Claressa's side maintains the allegation is false. Contamination. Accidental exposure. A technical error. And realistically, none of that is impossible. But public opinion doesn't wait for explanations. It responds. And it responds viciously. Especially when the storyline has already framed Claressa as exposed, emotionally invested, allegedly seeking validation from a man who's still married, allegedly reduced to not the only one. So when the substance narrative enters the picture, it doesn't exist in isolation. It piles onto an already unstable image. And that's when the internet does what it always does. It turns a complicated human into a role. Not a person, a character. And once you become a character, every move gets filtered through the harshest interpretation possible. Now, while all of this is playing out in public, something far more volatile is developing quietly. Because enemies can wound you, but former friends can destroy you. And that's where Jada re-enters the frame, not as background noise, not as hearsay, but as a genuine threat. Because the claims attributed to Jada don't just embarrass Claressa. They rewrite her entire narrative. They don't challenge decisions, they challenge autonomy. And that's why even people who doubt Jada's version still feel unsettled by what's being alleged. Because if even a fraction of it were accurate, the implications wouldn't be tabloid level. They'd be criminal. And here's the most frightening part. Once allegations like that hit the public sphere, they can't be erased with clarification. They linger permanently. Which is why silence suddenly becomes strategic. Notice how Claressa doesn't rush online in outrage. She doesn't explode. She doesn't respond emotionally. Because reacting with emotion to claims like that is a setup. Instead, the response cools, repositioning Claressa as someone harmed, not complicit. And that distinction is critical. Because legally, it changes everything. If Claressa is framed as manipulated, exploited, or wronged, the story shifts from a fair drama to survivor narrative. And instantly, the person who thought they were exposing her becomes the one at risk. Which is exactly why this next interview moment lands like a warning shot.
So this is Jada Davis, and this is Claressa's ex-bestie. I don't take it that they're still best friends, because why would she be telling this girl business like this? I said, do she think she Tasha K or something? Does this little girl think she Tasha K? Jada! What? Baby, you should have came to me and I would have helped to put this out in a way where you're not looking bad. This is bad, Jada. This is bad. You really made Claressa look good and you made yourself look bad. You're a bad, bad person. A bad person. I don't even understand what is the point of you doing all of this. Yeah, I'm about to hire her. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Listen. I wanted to reach out for a job. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Okay, listen, baby girl. Just like my team is going to go through newsroom training with my defamation lawyers so they'll know how to post so that it doesn't cost us money. If Claressa turns around and sues you, you're going to lose because she was a victim. Like, this was...
That clip is doing something very intentional. It doesn't confirm the claims. It reroutes the risk. Instead of asking, did this happen? It pivots to, why would you say this? And that shift is powerful. Because the moment motive becomes the focus, credibility starts to wobble. Retaliation? Bitterness? A friendship imploding and going scorched earth? Suddenly, the audience rewatches everything through a different filter. And the language quietly changes from exposing Claressa to, why is Jada saying this now? That isn't accidental. That's narrative combat. And it works because it taps into something people understand instinctively. The most devastating betrayals usually come from inside the circle. By this point, the story has evolved again. It's not just about Claressa anymore. It's not even just about Papoose or Remy. It's about control. Because whoever controls the story controls the outcome. Look at what's happening all at once. Claressa's image is under attack. Tasha K is boxed in legally. Jada is being positioned as reckless. Papoose stays mostly silent. Remy's presence hangs over everything without a word. Silence turns into a weapon. And silence is loud. By the end of this part, the audience shouldn't feel informed, they should feel uneasy. Because the most unsettling stories aren't the ones where everything comes out. They're the ones where too many people are protecting themselves simultaneously. When that happens, truth doesn't surface cleanly. It leaks. In pieces. In mistakes. In apologies that feel rehearsed instead of sincere. And that's exactly where this story is heading. Because if this chapter is about legal danger and narrative control, what comes next won't be about embarrassment. It'll be about who breaks first. And someone always does. By the time silence becomes strategy, the situation is already spiraling. Because silence doesn't stop chaos, it redirects it. At this stage, everyone involved understands one thing. Whatever happens next won't be undone with explanations. It will be defined by collapse. This is where part 3 begins, not with a new allegation, but with consequences. The internet doesn't move on once a story enters legal territory. It digs in. Screenshots get saved. Old interviews get replayed. Every past clip is re-examined under a harsher light. And suddenly, moments that once felt harmless start carrying weight. Especially when people start realizing this may never have been about love at all. It may have been about leverage. Look at the pattern. A world-class image is elevated publicly, disciplined, focused, untouchable. Privately, emotional reliance allegedly forms with someone still legally bound to another woman. Public embarrassment follows. Then legal pressure. Then apologies. Then reframing. That's not random. That's a failure sequence. And failure sequences always reveal the weakest structure first. For Claressa, the real risk isn't any single rumor. It's what happens when multiple narratives stack just close enough to feel plausible. That's why the pivot toward framing Claressa as a victim becomes essential. Because victimhood changes everything legally, morally, socially. It reshapes who the public feels safe attacking. If Claressa is viewed as manipulated, cornered, or exploited, then suddenly the people speaking about her look careless. And careless speech is the fastest way to lose a case. Which leads to the most uncomfortable truth in this entire saga. The most dangerous allegations aren't the ones screamed online. They're the ones that make people go quiet. Watch what happens next. Papoose stays silent. Remy avoids oversharing. Tasha K tightens every word. And Jada stands increasingly alone inside her claims. That isn't coincidence. That's risk calculation. Because once lawsuit stops being hypothetical, everything changes. Loud voices get cautious. Jokes get deleted. People who thought they were exposing realize exposure cuts both ways. And this is where the story turns cold. Because at this stage, it's no longer about truth. It's about survival. Who can afford the fight? Who can handle discovery? Who has messages they don't want opened? Who has witnesses they don't want questioned? That's why the registered weapon comment lands differently, not as a threat, but as a warning.
ass, and if Claressa find you, she gonna whoop your ass. Oh, Claressa gonna whoop your ass. Oh, Claressa gonna whoop your ass, and I can't save you. Nobody can save you. Nobody. She's a trained killer. Her hands are trained. They're registered as.
Pay attention to what that line is really doing. On the surface, it sounds like confidence. Underneath, it's about consequence. It reminds everyone watching that Claressa isn't just a name on a screen being debated. She's a trained fighter whose body itself carries legal meaning. Literal or symbolic, the signal is unmistakable. This situation isn't harmless for people who speak recklessly. That one moment shifts the atmosphere. Because now the audience isn't only thinking about embarrassment or scandal, they're thinking about what happens when words spill into real-world danger. And that's when the internet instinctively pulls back. Not out of empathy, but because fear always drowns out curiosity. At this stage, the best friend betrayal storyline starts collapsing under its own weight. The focus isn't on what Jada said anymore. It's on why she chose to say it that way. Because there's a difference between sharing your truth and unloading someone else's trauma in public. And once that boundary is crossed, public support disappears fast. Harder questions start surfacing. Why didn't this come out before? Why now, when Claressa is already under attack? Why release claims that, if true, would implicate multiple adults, institutions, and systems? Those questions don't necessarily protect Claressa, but they absolutely put the spotlight on the person making the accusations. And that's when the internet smells blood in a new direction. Suddenly, Jada doesn't appear courageous. She appears exposed. And exposure without a safety net is one of the most dangerous places to exist online. At the same time, the conversation around manufactured black love starts to lock into place, and this is where the story outgrows any single individual. Because Remy and Papoose weren't just partners. They were a brand, a symbol, a counter-image to dysfunction. Loyalty after incarceration. Ride-or-die mythology. Once that image fractures, everything beneath it gets audited. Old interviews start sounding rehearsed. Past praise feels calculated. Silences begin to look intentional. People start asking whether the relationship was ever what it claimed to be, or whether it was a long performance that served everyone involved. And Claressa, unfortunately, may have stepped into the aftermath of that performance without realizing the stage was already unstable. Because here's the part few people say openly. If Papoose valued Claressa the way she allegedly valued him, she wouldn't be standing alone under public scrutiny. She wouldn't be absorbing all the narrative damage herself. She wouldn't be the one labeled, analyzed, and questioned while he remains mostly untouched. That imbalance doesn't resemble love. It resembles use. And once that idea settles in, the public story hardens. Not against Claressa, but against the situation she allowed herself to enter. That's why the tone around her changes. From jokes to concern. From mockery to sympathy. From side relationship commentary to, how did this happen to her? And that shift is brutal. Because pity doesn't restore power. It quietly takes it away. By the end of part 3, the audience should feel one thing unmistakably. This story is no longer escalating for spectacle. It's stabilizing for containment. Which means the loudest chapter may already be over. What comes next won't be yelled online. It won't be streamed live. It won't be turned into punchlines. It will unfold quietly, through attorneys, through statements that never get released, through evidence the public never sees. And when that happens, what's left will be fragments, edited memories, unanswered questions. But one